Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO series, where we bring together the most phenomenal people from across the globe, and they share their career journeys with the audience. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of welcoming a guest whose vision is expansive as his achievement, amazing achievements. This understanding has propelled him to an extraordinary journey of learning and leadership. He's also from the same town I'm from in South Carolina. My city is a little bigger than his city by 3,000 people. So, from the laboratories of Clemson University, where he earned a patent for a life saving medical device, to the hallowed halls of University of Cambridge, as well as the vibrant classrooms of Tsinghua University, in China. And with that, I want to welcome Joey. How are you?
Thank you, Ron. It's great to be here with you again. I guess you'll tell the story later, but last time we saw each other in person was in Pakistan. So good to be
Yes.
here virtually. And yeah, I can't wait to see you again in person soon. It's an honor.
Yeah, it wasn't Pakistan where we had dinner on that mountaintop. That was cool. So thank you so much for being a guest and making time because you just got back from a long trip. You just got back from South Carolina. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So walk us through your career journey from Duncan, South Carolina to now living in Munich.
Yeah, it's been a winding road, and a lot of times people, kind of ask about the journey. And one quote I always plug is my favorite quote, which is from Drake. That's sometimes the journey teaches you a lot about the destination because
Oh,
I never really knew exactly where I was going. I just knew I appreciated the moment and tried to do my best. But you're right. I grew up in Duncan, South Carolina, small town, a couple thousand people called Duncan. High school, I switched over. I made a big jump, took a big risk. And I think that's something that I do quite a lot in my life. I really think in life, it's not about the opportunities you get, it's about the opportunities you take. So I
okay.
took a risk, took a jump, did my last 2 years of high school in Hartsville, South Carolina, Governor's School for Science and Math, really challenged me. When I was there, what I learned most actually was that I'm not the best. It was a place where really I learned I'm not the best at everything. It really humbled me and made me realize it's really good if you're good at one thing or mediocre at a bunch of things. And I think I'm the latter. So I really
Mhm.
like learning. But after that, made a tough decision, went to Clemson in South Carolina. Initially, I think people don't know this. It wasn't my first choice school. But in the end, from an economical school spirit and all around perspective, I decided to go there, and it was the best decision I could have ever made.
Yeah.
Did biomedical engineering there, minored in politics, was active inside the lab and inside the classroom, but also on campus. Served as the student body president, tackled some big issues there, tackled some social issues on the national level as well. And what I learned there, I would say the biggest thing was I'm a scientist at heart. I love
Mm.
technical stuff. I'm an engineer at heart. I love building things. But in the end, these fields don't work alone. They don't live in silos. So what I realized at this time was to be successful and impactful in the world, you have to build bridges and
Yeah.
build bridges with fields that you're passionate about. Exactly. Bring everything together. So that's why I look to go abroad. And that's why I learned or tried to study different things. So
Hmm.
following undergrad, I ended up in Beijing, as you mentioned, at Tsinghua University as a Schwarzman Scholar. It's often referenced as the Modern Rhodes Scholarship, but our
Okay.
benefactor, Steve Schwarzman, the founder of Blackstone, is still living. And the goal is to bring young people to China to learn about the world and study global affairs,
Wow.
business,
Wow.
and policy. So
Mm.
there, I figured out how to bring everything together and kind of build bridges between these fields, not only these fields, but also geographies, China, Europe, and the
Mm.
US. But to complete the Europe part, I wanted to do another degree and go back to science, see if it made sense to be in the classroom or in the lab or working in a different field. And did a research degree there in cancer research at the University of Cambridge. Had an amazing time, but found really my thing is more people oriented and more strategic. And that's why I eventually focused on strategy consulting in the life science space. And that's kind of how I bring everything together and how I want to make my impact.
That's an amazing story. But you know what caught my ear when you mentioned that you realized that you weren't good at something, and you'd had to make adjustments in doing that. And I think lots of times we think we're good at things, and then that
Mhm.
powerful moment comes in, and we realize that you ain't all that. And then you got to figure out how to bounce back from that. Give us a little more deeper interpretation of that. When you came to that realization, the mental aspects of it is, what do I do now? How do I repurpose this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just shocking because my bubble before moving to Hartsville in high school was really my town of Duncan, where, it's a great place to grow up, but you're not as exposed to a lot of different things, and there were a lot of places I had white spots, and I think even more than understanding I wasn't necessarily the best at everything was also understanding that I hadn't even been exposed to so many things. And that's
Hmm.
a reoccurring theme in my life. I mean, moving to China, moving to the UK and to Germany, I realized there were topics that I never had heard of, historical events that I'd never been exposed to in my history class in high school in South Carolina. And
Wow.
really, I think the thing that defines me, one single trait, is curiosity. So
Okay.
that's really what I think realizing I wasn't good at everything in high school made me do. It really forced me to seek knowledge and see all these places where I don't understand because I really want to be exposed to things across the world. So I
Yeah.
think that's how it reoriented me.
So, when we were together in Pakistan, and we were sitting down talking, then we found that we had a connection between small towns in South Carolina. We both live international lives. And, so I'm always interested in that, because coming from a small town, you don't have a vision outside of that town or that state. And you're in, Duncan, then you go to Hartsville, which is considered to be a city from Duncan,
It's true.
but you had that vision. So where did that come from? Was that something that you learned or through reading to say, I want to do more than this? Where did that thirst come from?
It's a tough question to answer. I think I give a lot of credit to my parents.
Okay.
My dad, especially, is a businessman who's traveled a lot. And when I was young, he worked for a German chemical company, and I traveled with him some when I was younger. So that was one thing. And he and my mom as well always supported me to kind of take these opportunities to go away from home and learn things.
Yeah.
Where I grew up, I feel like your parents are so impactful, and really, I give a lot of credit to mine and giving me the freedom to explore different things, and
Mm.
not necessarily mandating things that I had to do, but more saying, "Here's the realm of possibility." And really, I think one beautiful thing about the United States is this idea of the American dream, which I think is still real, and the idea that you can be anything and achieve anything if you work hard.
Yeah.
So I always really believe that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So
Okay.
I'd like to think I have a little talent, but even more than that, I really think that I'm willing to just grind it out and work hard.
Okay. So we both came small town backgrounds, and I want to do a shout out to my good buddy Joe Levy, who is also from Sumter, South Carolina, and he and I worked together at IBM, years ago. We have John Self from Texas, who's a frequent listener for the program, and my good buddy, my big shot attorney friend in Washington D.C., Jim Moy. So we all came from similar backgrounds. John started out as a reporter, and now he's doing amazing work in executive search and guiding people careers. So all these things are important. Um, when we think about how do we make the decision to move here, to go here, to try this, because I'm thinking small town, I wanted my biomedical engineering. So I'm going to reference this back to Marion. Get a degree, you're going to be a teacher, you're going to major in whatever it is. I knew I wanted to major in business because I always enjoyed business. My father was a small time businessman, and I knew I wanted to do that. So that you've got business and all these other common degrees. Where did I want to do biomedical engineering? How do you even spell that? you know, coming from our background. I won't say Duncan, but I'll say our background.
Yeah, I mean, coming up with that, I really think it's crazy how the role of coincidences exist in our lives. And I mean, for me, the biggest coincidence was going to the governor's school. We had to do research between our junior and senior year of high school, and I knew I was also interested in engineering. But the reason why I ended up that summer doing research at Clemson in biomedical engineering was simply because a friend of mine from home's brother did the same thing.
Okay.
So I knew I always wanted to be an engineer, but I didn't know what direction. And I really took the medical route in the end. I've thought about this a lot because where we come from, as you know, Ron, access to healthcare you would think would be quite good, but actually it's the opposite. And I saw a lot of people growing up really suffer from different conditions, physical and mental. And I really wanted my life mission to be enabling people to access care because it's such a basic need and something that even in the United States, we don't do 100% correctly. So
Yeah.
that is kind of what pushed me in this direction. And really, as a biomedical engineer, you can focus on a lot of things. I focused on medical devices, which is something you mentioned before, and then also expanded that into more biological research, kind of basic things. So I would say engineering gave me a toolkit to solve problems. That's really what it is in the end. And the scientific side gave me the insight into understand how I can best solve those problems. So that's
Wow.
it.
Yeah. Well, you say that's it as if it's just like that. But how, when you create and win I don't know whether I'm using the right terminology, but you get a patent for a medical device.
That's
That's
right.
that's the Oscars of whatever it is that you're doing, because this is not just easy coming up with an idea and sitting it off and you get a rubber stamp. Walk us through that process. And where did the inspiration come from to say, I think I have something here figured out?
Yeah. Well, actually, I give Clemson a lot of credit for that. From the very beginning, going to Clemson, I was involved in research in high school because of my high school, but also in the university because of all the programs they have there. And the bioengineering program at Clemson is first class. For example, its graduate program is one of the oldest in the country. And a lot of
Hmm.
people don't know that Clemson is not only a football powerhouse, but an engineering powerhouse as well.
Wow.
So, really, I think I was lucky to be in that program doing research with a woman named Dr. Delphine Dean. So, if you're listening, hello, Dr. Dean. But she really is a luminary and an inspiration and someone who guided her students. I think there are a lot of problems in scientific research, but with her, she was always a great mentor, a great manager, and enabled us to kind of come together, put our minds together, and try to think and be practical, how to solve problems. So, what we specifically created was a metal detector for finding markers that are used in the staging and diagnosis of breast cancer.
Wow.
Why? Because typically those markers they use are very small, which makes sense. But in the past, they'd been making them radioactive to find them inside the tissue, which is counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
So we thought, is there a better way to do it? And we came up with an idea and a prototype. And in the end, it was a novel idea. So Clemson worked with us to patent it. And yeah, it's existing. You can find it online, look at all the drawings we did, and something I'm very proud of.
So how did that feel? You open a letter, whatever it is, your patent has been approved. I mean, that's got to be.
It was a great feeling and a long process.
Long
It takes some
process.
time, but yeah, definitely one confirmation of a job well done and something that I keep with me from my undergrad days because now I turned 29 in July of this year. And yeah, undergrad was some time ago. I graduated in 2017 from Clemson. So over
Yeah.
7 years now.
Some time ago, I won't even do the calculation on my side, but it's cool as it relates to that. You know what? I did love the fact that you called out your mentor and a person who was responsible for a lot of the foundations that we go through in life. I think lots of times people get to a certain point and they feel it's all about them doing that. But there was a lot of building blocks and someone there to help you and guide you through. And I really appreciate Dr. Delphine, if you're listening, I appreciate the impact that you had, on Joey and other students too, in driving that along. We also have a comment here from Dr. Selena. You know, she says, I love that ultimately Joey Wilson motivations comes from within. Hard work catalyzes talent, as well as Peter Piccini, who's also a frequent listener. He says "Guten Tag Tag." So whatever that means, would you want to translate that?
Good day.
Good day. Okay,
Wir,
cool.
wir können auch Deutsch sprechen. Kein Problem.
Okay, cool. Speaking of that, so have you? I don't want to say conquered. Have you become fluent in the language?
Fluent would be
A stretch.
that would be incorrect, but I can
Yeah.
get around for sure. And one good thing is that in the past couple of years, Germany has become much more open to immigration, especially of talent. So now it's becoming much easier to live here, settle here, and ultimately even become a citizen, which is super exciting.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So in navigating through that, what is Joey's way of navigating challenges? Because when you give a recap, it sounds easy and things, everything fell into place. But I'm sure there was a lot of sleepless nights. What's next? What do I do now? What is the anchor? What is your way of overcoming challenges?
That's a great question. I mean, I would start and just say completely transparently, it hasn't been easy. I think a lot of times when you look at the product, you don't think about all the steps that went into it. And for me, it was not linear. There was a lot of uncertainty along the way. And I think at the end, the thing that causes people the most stress is uncertainty. So,
Mm,
one rule I live by is trying to control the controllables, making sure we take care of those things that are in our power and those things that are outside of our control, which is most of them. Just try to leave it, but it's not so easy. But
yeah.
in terms of conquering challenges, I give a credit to a lot of my people in my life, my mentors, certainly, not only Dr. Dean, but so many other mentors who I value their opinion, including you, Ron, many friends, my family. I think it's really important in life to surround yourself with people who inspire you and try to lean on them, but also, of course, offer support as well. Just
Yeah.
building meaningful relationships because in the end, at the end of our journey, when that time comes, what people will remember of us isn't our achievements or our accomplishments, it's how we made them feel. So
Yeah.
I referenced Maya Angelou with that one, and I
Mm,
really live by that. So
mm,
yeah, to conquer challenges, I think it's important to, think things over and try to be pragmatic, but also to just really keep the right people around you in any way you can.
yeah. So I don't want to say high pressure situations, but the work that you do is high level. How do you handle the pressures of deadlines? You may have not figured it out yet. What's the next step in the project plan, whatever it is? What
Yeah,
is
what
what?
That's a great question. I mean, what I always find myself is in the end, we're all people. And I think people appreciate authenticity, transparency, and good communication. Um, one thing I would say, which I've thought about a lot and also talked with Dr. Selena about a lot, is the influence of artificial intelligence on our world because, this technology has come and really revolutionized everything. And it's a question of, is knowledge even a commodity anymore? If
Mm,
there's something out there that just has almost infinite knowledge, what makes us special? And I think it's two things. It's building bridges, so connecting the dots across different disparate information, but also it's the soft skill side. It's people skills. It's being able to, work with people and understand people and build relationships. So I think, of course, we all have high pressure times and there are, all kinds of situations that can come up. I think you have to stay true to your values, communicate openly, and yeah, in the end, focus on the people side. The results matter a lot, but as Simon Sinek, who's one of my favorite authors on leadership, talks about, it's not actually about your performance; it's more about trust.
hmm.
Um, and he talked about that in his most recent book. So,
Yeah.
of course, you have to perform at a certain level, but after a certain level, people are much more satisfied with who you are, not
Hmm.
necessarily what you bring.
So as you talk through that people skills and anchoring that relationship building, because one of the key points that came out of COVID is a different type leader, a leader that that tries to understand people, to build relationships, and but sometimes people don't have those skills. And I say that I'm gonna use this as an analogy. Engineering and people in those skills are highly technical, but that add-on is having that soft skills, that the relationship you talked about with your mother and father, what they built from that, the relationship you have with them, the relationship you had with your dean and other people in your lives. How would you counsel leaders today that's coming through and you kind of realize that, so you're talking about the people skills relationship, what would be your advice to senior leaders in organizations?
It's a great question. Actually, I have a lot of books on my desk, and one is a book called Managing Performing Living: Effective Management for a New Era by Fredman Malik. And I was recommended this from one of my mentors, who's also a colleague of mine. And I read this book, and one main takeaway from this book is actually that leadership is a learned skill. It's not a skill that's innate. It's something that you can practice and that you have to practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my advice to anybody who wants to be a better leader or a better manager really is to be open, honest, transparent, collect feedback, bad and good, understand where you're not so good, and really try to work on it. And I've had experiences in my career so far where I've seen people improve a lot in this area because they were willing to step up and try. So in the end, I think you can do a lot of reading. I think you can do a lot of self-study, but you just have to practice. Practice
Yeah.
makes perfect.
Well, in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned the fact that you realized you weren't as good as you thought you were in something. And I think lots of times, and this is from my vantage point, because I do leadership development across the globe, is that leaders think they're great. They think I would use a Southern phrase, but I'm not going to use that nothing stinks. I mean, everything works the way it should be. But when you go and talk to that team, it's totally different. So if you're managing people, and do you have a team that you're working with now?
Yes, I work with teams very frequently, both client-facing and internal.
Okay, so you're kind of that orchestra leader. I call it
Yes.
symphonic leader in doing that. And so are you trying to connect those groups together, and we bring out our flaws and we feel comfortable in saying that, which is another thing that's talked about, is psychological safety.
Yep. I think you have to try to build personal relationships with people. Of course, it depends on culture. That's another huge topic in our world.
Yeah.
Being able to work across cultures, especially in the organizations that we have now. But yeah, in the end, I think it's important to try to understand people's situations and to not jump to conclusions. Like, I think the most important trait of a leader also is curiosity, and in that also empathy. For example, if you have someone who's underperforming on your team, instead of pointing out the what, which is that they're underperforming, you should look for the why, because maybe there's something going on that you don't even know about. And if there's psychological safety and trust and people can share that, maybe you can even help. So in the end, I think sometimes managers are too focused on the what and not focused enough on the how and the why. Most importantly, the why.
I use an example sometimes because there was a young lady that worked for me years ago, and she told me, and I noticed that something was happening because she wasn't focused. And I mentioned to her one day, I said, whenever you're ready to talk, let me know. I said, because I know something's going on. We don't need to do it now. And she was going to try to explain it, and her voice broke. And I said, nope, not now. Bad time. Let me know when. She came in a week later and said, can we go for a walk? In New York City, you'd say go for a walk. That means walk around the block.
Yeah.
But you can talk better without in the office with awards and all these kinds of things. And she says, I'm thinking about quitting. So I always go back to that. Listen, how many people work for a boss that they're struggling with their job, ace performer, but she's thinking about quitting because she realized it wasn't what she wanted to do. And I always think of that conversation, not so much for the minutia of the conversation, but that she felt comfortable, psychological safety to say, I'm really thinking about quitting this job. Are you building that kind of a team whereby people feel that comfort zone, that they could share anything with you?
And I think that's really critical to have that trust, because what I always say is Trust takes a long time to build, but it's
Yeah.
very easy to destroy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you really have to, build it up and yeah, follow your values. Also, establishing norms as a team really important. The way of working, how to communicate, all these things. I think it's good to have a ground rules to refer to as a team,
Yeah.
and that's something that I think in my field in general, we try at the beginning of every engagement because you're usually working with different people to establish norms. And maybe there are leaders out there that just haven't even done that in their company or their team yet because it's
Yeah.
so foundational that I think a lot of times people forget about it.
Yeah. I think when I look and study leadership over past years, the rah rah leader comes in on the proverbial white horse and comes in and just
Mhm.
rounds everybody up and everybody. That's those days are over with. That model, if it ever worked, that's kind of we've been kind of sold those bag of goods. But the key leader today, they've been sitting down having I call it a coffee chat. They're just getting to know each other.
Yep.
Beyond that. Yeah.
And one thing that I love doing everywhere is actually just reaching out to people. So as a junior employee or as a young person who's interested in a field, especially with the technology like LinkedIn, I think it's great if we just reach out to people and say, "Hey, I love what you do. Would you be willing to have a coffee with me?"
Mhm.
Because what I've seen in my life is that typically people are willing to take the time, and also you gain so much personally, but somehow or a lot of times I see they also can gain things from you.
Yeah.
And what one other plug I would say is I think no matter where you are in your career, like I would say I'm still very early career. I'm not even 30 yet, but still there are people who reach out to me pretty often and ask for some time, and typically I'll meet with people, and I've developed some amazing relationships with people super serendipitously that I've met through LinkedIn, for example. Just
Hmm.
the other week, I met with one of my mentees named Luis, who's a great guy. We met through LinkedIn about a year ago, and I've been helping him on his master's journey and his career journey. And we met up in person for the first time and had a great time. So I really think technology, even though a lot of times we feel further away, there are so many opportunities to build meaningful relationships and come closer.
Hmm. So if I had a drum roll, I'd say drum roll, please. Talk about the award that you just won. It was one of the most distinguished alumni, a recent alumni from Clemson University. That has to be another big spot on the shelf. Walk
Oh,
us through
yeah.
that.
For sure. Yeah, I was recently named a member of the Roaring 10 at Clemson. Every year, they name 10 alumni from the past 10 years who they recognize as outstanding in different ways, whether it's from philanthropy or from giving back to the university or business opportunities, educational. There are a lot of different potential criteria, but yeah, in a nutshell, it's the people who, are the best 10 alumni from the past years. And it's a huge honor. I'm very thankful for the recognition, and it definitely drives me to do more and also reminds me that I'm on the right path. But
Yeah,
from this, it's a great feeling, but it just reinforces to me that I want to give back as well, not
yeah.
only to the university, but to the community and ultimately to the world.
Hmm. Well, the work you're doing is really giving back to the world. When you're talking about oncology and the key points that you're working on. So all that's important, in doing that. So that had to be a tremendous honor at your age. I mean, you mentioned 29, which I didn't know, but that's cool that you're receiving that award, because normally when you see awards coming like that is when you've that mid to near, I won't say near the end, but you're getting up there and doing those kind of things. So that must have been just tremendous at your age. So how do you build from that? I mean, they recognize that you came through, you made impact, and you were also, and this is what I was reading in your bio, you not only that, but you graduated magna cum laude. It's hard for me to even spell that. At Clemson, you were a Schwartzman Scholar when you studied in China. You were the student body president. There was a lot of things going on, man. I mean, how did you maintain a semblance of balance? Not that you were working towards all of these honors, but you were just recognized because we saw that. How do you stay focused?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's just about having routines and trying to stay grounded in a lot of things that are important. I think I guess my generation and maybe the generation after me, I'm still a millennial, and I definitely claim the millennial generation. But I think sometimes there's a bad rap. But I think the good thing is, now you can really focus holistically on your life and prioritize things like health and family and friends as well as your job. So I really do my best to maintain that basis.
Mm,
5 times a week or 4 times a week during the work week, I wake up at 6 and go to the gym, because I think that's really important to get
yeah.
movement in your life. I make
Hmm.
sure to go outside and get fresh air and some sunlight when it's around in Germany. Um, I think you have to get people around you, as I mentioned before, who will keep you honest, who will say, "Hey, I think you're, not doing the right thing here," or "I see how stressed you are. Like, let's go do something." I think it's all of these things, and at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we should live life to enjoy it. So it's important to succeed and important to work towards impact. For example, which is something I do not only in my work but in my personal time with the Global Shapers community, which is a volunteer group am a part of too. So, I think we can use our free time to meet friends, to eat well, to exercise, and also to give back. And to me,
Yeah.
that's balance. I
You
know
know,
your
I
next question is, when do I sleep? And the answer is not enough.
no, no, no. But you know what I was laughing about is that when we were talking through um, the situation you were just speaking about, I thought about a southern euphemism for my father would always say, "You're getting too big for your britches.
Yep.
Calm, calm it
Yep.
down a little bit and come
Yep.
back to reality." As you're doing that and trying to move forward. So I want to go back to the not specifically the work you're in. So you talked about the mental aspect. I'm reading books and I try and stay focused, relationships and all those things. And what always was intrigues me about you, and I'll tell you this now, is when we met in, was that Karachi or was it Karachi we were?
I think we're in Islamabad together.
Islamabad. Okay. Because it's going on now because I couldn't make it because I'm traveling next week. I'm in Germany next week, but I'm in Frankfurt. Um, when we met, as soon as we got the angle and connection to South Carolina, our entire conversation, the whole night was about the relationships, kind of the same conversations we're having now. It had nothing to do with magna cum laude, any of things like that, because I got to know you as a person. And even our relationship now is we talk all the time, back and forth, but the relationship was anchored on something. And when you think of that in terms of leading people or leadership and all those things, it's anchored outside of work. The work situation is different. But if it was the relationships and trying to connect with people,
Yeah,
any
you're
thoughts?
totally right.
Yeah.
You're totally right. I think when it comes down to it, in the end, it all comes down to relationships. And yeah, you have to find common ground with someone at first. But I think there are opportunities always to find common ground with people. Everywhere
Hmm.
I've been in the world, from Pakistan and China and Japan to Mongolia to Germany, the Balkans, the US. I mean, no matter what, there is always common ground we can find. We just have to be willing to sit down and have those conversations.
Hmm.
It's such a difficult time. I think there's so much uncertainty in the world right now, and yeah, I wish it were easier for everybody to find common ground, but it's a difficult time for sure.
Yeah. That's an entirely different conversation where
Totally.
you were going there, specifically in these days and time. So it comes back to that. So when you look at the illustrious your career, and at a vantage point of being 29 and being a millennial, which one of all of those accomplishments stands out? I'm particularly proud of this, or is there one or two?
I, I would give one, because for me, I think the most important thing we do is impact others. And One thing I was involved in college, which you haven't mentioned yet, was my involvement with the It's On Us movement. This is a social movement that was started by, at that time, Vice President Biden and President Obama. And yeah, in college, just to make the story really succinct, I had a friend who confided in me that she had been assaulted on campus. We sought help and tried to, navigate that whole process. And in the end, we realized how messed up the system was, and we decided we were going to do something about it. So we brought this movement to Clemson. We built a whole organization bringing around different groups from campus, a lot of non-traditional partners for something like this, fraternities and sororities, athletic teams, Army ROTC. We brought everybody to the table and said, some people say you're part of the problem, but you have to be part of the solution. So we really tried to build a whole contingent of leaders on campus from different groups, educate them about this issue, and get them to build a skill set with their members to do something about it. And that's exactly what we did. And in the end, it's a much longer story, but I was involved on the national committee for this organization and worked directly with Vice President Biden to tackle this issue on campuses across America. And to me, I think good leadership is sustainable leadership, which means you build something, you make an impact, but then when it's time to hand it over, you can do that and it still lives. And the proudest thing, I guess, from this, aside from the impact on some individuals and the change that's still enduring at the university, is that the student organization I founded still exists today with completely different membership, people I've never met. Probably if you ask them if a white fraternity guy was ever involved in this organization, they would say absolutely not. But actually, it was me and a few people like Megan Fallon, the interpersonal violence prevention coordinator from Clemson, and a friend of mine who had that experience on campus. So if you ask me in my life what my biggest accomplishment is, it would be being really involved in this issue and trying to do something to make a difference on college campuses, because it's really actually from this experience, just to say a little more, I hosted Vice President Biden on Clemson's campus, and bringing a sitting Democratic vice president to campus was a big shakeup at that time. But
to say the least.
Everybody was excited to hear from him and hear what he had to say. And after the event, he and I talked personally, and he gave me some advice that I'll never forget. He, sat with me for a few minutes and told me, what's right. And if you know what's right, you have to fight for it. You always have to fight for the things you believe in and fight for what's right. So it's something I live by. And that exact conversation is what led me to run for student body president at Clemson. I credit Joe Biden a lot, not as a politician, but more as a person and somewhat of a mentor at that time, and inspiring me for that. And I ran to address issues that we don't talk about enough societally. Okay. There are a lot of things that I think we should talk about more. And it all starts with a conversation.
Wow. That was super, super powerful. So do you envision a career maybe in politics later on? Because the leadership quotient in the U.S. is, I'll just leave it as that, but that sound.
Sure.
Do you envision something like that? I mean, later in life, you talk about 29, but all the awards you've won, once you've accomplished, maybe is there something that you could possibly see in public service? Because I think, here's my thought, we need younger leaders. I've always said, when I look at what's going on across the globe, I said you need younger leaders and you need more women making these decisions, because a lot of this foolishness that goes on, it would not happen. Do you envision that, or you see something like that?
I'm super open to it. I get the question a lot, and it always cracks me up. I take it as a compliment. I think you never know. I'm never going to rule it out. I think there are a lot of ways we can make an impact. It's really the age-old question of, do you enter something and change it from the inside, or do you challenge it from the outside? And I think both are valid. So today I would see myself more as an outside challenger because I'm definitely not in the US or German political scene, but I won't say that it'll never happen. I would be
Mhm,
open to it for sure.
mhm,
But
mhm.
right now, my focus is more um, my career and also my community service and giving back through the Global Shapers community. So
Okay.
let's see. You never know. But
Okay.
I think there
Well,
are all kinds of ways we can help make the world a better place through
well,
politics or not.
I'm 100,000%. Let me know. I'll fly in and do whatever I need to do to be a part of that because I think
Perfect.
you are a great leader, and I really admire your grit and what you've built. And we both come from small towns, and when you look at the trajectory from here, how did you get from here to here in doing that? So there's a lot of steps, missteps, and all those things that come about as a result of that. So I wanted to get back to one more question before we begin the process of closing. Um, AI, artificial intelligence, and all these things. Is that going to have a huge impact on us as you look out from your space, biomedical engineering, and looking at all of these challenges we're having now? Do you see that there's possibility that we could use some of this brain power to solve some of these issues? And I'm going to say around medicine or whatever it would be.
Sure. So in general, I compare the current situation to the 2000s. I see it more as like the advent of the internet. There's a lot of stuff out there that's really legit and going to be huge and always exist. Some things unexpected will probably be huge. If we recall, 20 years ago, Amazon was a bookstore online. Now it's a huge organization.
Yeah.
There have been players that have always existed in that space, like Apple and Microsoft, that are still giants. So a company like Nvidia, I see definitely remaining relevant. But I think there's a lot of stuff out there that we don't expect that could have a huge impact, and things that maybe are really overhyped. I can't tell
Mhm.
you what, but I would draw parallels to that overall situation.
Okay.
Um, Another thing that I always think about, I'll plug another of my mentors here, Pat Biltgen. He's currently at Booz Allen Hamilton, but he was my first internship boss ever, and actually my favorite boss of all time. I talk to him often. He just published a book on AI in defense, really amazing book that I can send to you. And um, when I worked with him as a defense contractor in the summer, I did non-security based work because I don't have a security clearance, so don't want to get people excited out there. I don't know any secret stuff, but I did some work with him, and a question that he always challenged me with was kind of like, we need to think holistically about technology and how it can be used. Not only the fun things, but also the bad things. And when I
Okay.
look at AI, I'm a bit worried in terms of regulation and guardrails because there are so many nefarious applications too that I think, are almost infinite. The ability to clone people's voices. I mean, this
Yeah.
whole conversation we could be having right now, we could be avatars.
Yeah.
Seriously, like this exists today. Um, so I think there's a lot of promise, but also we have to be careful societally to ensure that this doesn't go somewhere we weren't expecting or weren't thinking about, especially as regular people. And I can give
Mm.
a couple examples in medicine that I think are really good right now. AI in terms of image processing, better than people almost at this point. In terms of reading scans and stuff, I think
Yes.
there's a great way to assist doctors. That's something very basic. And also, there are a lot of great stories out there. For example, there was a bakery in Japan in the 2000s that was having some trouble. They knew strategically that if they offered more products, they would sell more. But the problem was their cashiers had trouble differentiating between all of the baked goods. So they created something that kind of was a precursor to AI, using images to help automatically calculate people's totals. The funny thing is, after a couple years and this becoming very good, they realized it could also identify cancer in scans or in histology, and they developed this in the medical area. And I think it's a great
Yeah.
story of how something that originally was used for one thing can be repurposed.
Mm.
Amazing. And this has existed for a while. It's one of my favorite stories of innovation and technology in medicine. But aside from like pictures and scans, there's a lot of stuff in predictive medicine, like understanding what happens, a lot of things in drug discovery, like for pharmaceutical companies trying to um, develop new drugs and research targets for them. There are real and tangible applications of AI across the value chain of pharmaceuticals as well as across the patient journey from diagnosis to treatment and recovery. So to me, there are a lot of real good applications and use cases for this. We just have to figure out a lot of things surrounding data security and yeah, some other aspects as well.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
think it's an exciting time for technology and all of these things in medicine, and I'm excited to see specifically how much further we can go and how hopefully this technology will bring all of the stakeholders in the industry together at one table, because I think that's going to be maybe the most important impact of
Yeah.
this, giving everybody an active role in solving problems in different arenas, including medicine.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. We've been working on this for the audience for a couple of months to try to get a timing in place to do that. I want to do a quick shout out to Shauna, who says agreed. It comes down to relationship. We were talking about the earlier part of our discussion. It sounds like a great organization. Bravo, Shauna. Thank you so much for always tuning in on Fridays. You know, the goals of creating this show was to bring together people like yourself. And I knew from the first time we met a few years back that you would make a great guest. And once we worked out what we needed to work out to get you there, because it's an amazing journey, because sometimes people, lots of times people see success and they have no idea what someone went through to get from here to here. Because I always envision it from my side as a pyramid, and you consistently climbing, you fall down, you get up again. And I think people need to hear more of that. And as opposed to just looking at the Facebook post, Instagram posts, or LinkedIn, giving successes in doing that. So this is what the show is about. So thank you for being a guest. And as we close out, I wanted to ask you any takeaways you want to give to the audience as we begin the process of closing out. And thank you for being a good friend over the years and being
Oh,
my alumnus from South Carolina, two small time boys. You've gone through stratospheric. I'm still trying to climb, but everything is cool. So if you have anything
nah.
for the audience to leave, let it give us a few words.
The last thing I would say, which is something I thought about because a few years ago I was invited to give the convocation speech back at the governor's school in South Carolina. So we can go back to Hartsville in this comment. And, you know, there's a phrase that says, we're like the five people that we spend the most time with. I don't know if you've ever heard that. But
Yeah.
actually, what I said in the speech is that I don't agree. It's not about time. To me, it's about impact.
Okay.
And what I've found in my life is that time, or excuse me, impact is not time dependent. So, what does that mean? And what do I take away from that? Number one, we should be open to people because people can come into our lives at any time and make a huge impact, just like you came into my life in Pakistan and have impacted me significantly. That's number one. But number two, we should turn it around and we should look at it and say, we can also come into people's lives and make their lives really great as well. You know, you have an opportunity with every conversation, many times in ways that you don't know, to impact somebody in a positive or, of course, a negative way. So I think really with that, we should take every interaction with new people or old friends as an opportunity to be positive and do something good for the world and for that person. So that's what I would leave everyone with, is really be impact driven if you can make it happen, and think about the legacy you want to leave, because in the end, people remember not our achievements, but their experience with us and how we make them feel.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So thank you so much for that. I also want to do a quick shout out to my friend Cedric Gerard, who was on the show a while back. He's Lake City, South Carolina.
Nice.
Grew up there, and now he's a captain at United Airlines.
Wow.
big things. He was on the show a few weeks back. So thank you so much for being a guest, and all of my South Carolina participants who logged in, Joe Levy and Jim Moy. Jim is not from South Carolina, but anyway, but all of those. So thank you so much. Hang on as we begin to close out. Thank you.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.